is the exact spot where Stumpy once grew. In fact, you can still see the remains of his huge roots. When Stumpy was a living tree, all this was a forest, part of the great Canadian temperate rainforest. Now this forest is gone, it's been clear-cut, and I've come all the way to Canada to investigate clear-cutting.
Stumpy's temperate rainforest is even rarer than the tropical forest that's usually in the news. On Vancouver Island in British Columbia, arguments rage over the future of the forests. The largest area of untouched rainforest is in Clayoquot Sound. Parts of it are protected from logging by a law passed last year. Others are not.
Some of the biggest and oldest trees in the world grow here. This western red cedar is about 1,500 years old, which means that it was already 1,000 years old when Columbus discovered America. The things that have happened in its lifetime. As you're walking through a forest, you might think that a dead tree, like this one, is a bit of an eyesore, but in fact it plays a crucial role in the life of the forest.
Snags, as they are known, provide a home to an incredible variety of wildlife, including a place to nest for many species of birds.
When a snag falls, it starts to rot and becomes a nurse log like this, a home to all sorts of seedlings, including this little spruce here, which will become the next generation of forest trees. This is what an old-growth ancient forest is all about. Trees of all ages, from seedlings to fallen logs to standing dead trees, and of course the living giants themselves.
Trees are very valuable for wildlife, for the environment, and for people. Canada is home to 10% of the Earth's forests, and it's the world's biggest exporter of forest products.
In an area that's covered in trees, it's not surprising that the logging industry plays a big part in providing jobs and investment.
But that has to be balanced against the cost to the environment. Since commercial logging began on the island 130 years ago, between 1/2 and 2/3 of the ancient temperate rainforest has been harvested.
The Canadian government has recently brought in new environmental guidelines to control the way the forest is harvested. Clear cuts like this one must either naturally regenerate themselves or be replanted within a few years.
So what exactly is a clear cut?
A clear cut is it's an area where all the timber is felled at the same time and harvested. Everything is removed at that time, and it's followed by an even-aged stand of mixed species.
How easy is it to establish a forest after it's been clear cut?
Well, here it's quite easy. Probably half the area is naturally seeded by the timber along the edge, and then after a year or two, our foresters will just make sure that the area is destined to be a good, healthy forest. This area below us here is probably 15 years old. It looks pretty green. The timber on the valley is 60 years old, and a lot of people have a hard time telling it from the old growth above it.
But for some local people, a replanted forest just isn't the same as the ancient trees it's replaced. Andrew Kataska is one of the group who found Stumpy.
There's more living matter in a hectare of this forest than there is anywhere else on Earth. When someone comes into the forest, the first thing they tend to see are the trees, these magnificent trees, and they are the biggest and most spectacular part of the forest, but they're really only one small part of it. There's thousands and thousands of different species that live all throughout the forest. The bacteria and fungus in the soil, mosses and ferns and lichens that grow and help break down the living organic matter into the soil. And the trees can't live without those. Those are just as important as the trees are.
What do you think about the second-growth forests that are being planted?
We're only beginning to learn about these type of forests. Of all of the different species of plants and animals that are here, there are still thousands that we haven't even identified yet. But of the ones that we have identified, we know that many of them can only live in this type of an old-growth forest with these old big trees providing canopy cover and the structure that the forest requires.
There are strong points to be made on both sides. Environmentalists love the old forest, not just for its magnificent beauty, but as a living laboratory. Others see it as a source of valuable timber and their only way of earning a living and supporting their families. Emotions run very high in the Clayoquot Sound area. There have been protests and blockades to stop the logging companies getting access to parts of the forests. The children at Wikaninish Elementary School have strong views about the forests too.
I really don't want them to cut down the old-growth forest, so I went and protested for them to stop.
They're logging too much and not using all the logs, so it's just a waste of the trees.
Jody, what do you think about the forests being logged around here?
Well, I think it's okay to be logged, because they have to log a little bit to keep some of the people in Tofino working.
I don't really think it's very good to log all the forest, because then the animals wouldn't have anything to live in.
Well, when they replant the forest, it doesn't grow back as good and not as full as the ones that were planted by nature.
Sitting in a magnificent tree like this, it's hard to imagine how anyone could possibly want to cut it down. But we all use wood for all sorts of things, for building houses and for making paper. I bet if you used a pencil today, it came from a western red cedar tree like this one.
But there is a way of using wood and preserving the forests. Merv Wilkinson's been practicing selective logging in his forest on the island for over 50 years.
Selective logging is the removal of some trees from the forest without cutting the whole forest. You must remember that you can't take more trees than you can grow. Now, we're looking at harvesting a tree here, and these trees are all healthy, but they are older trees, and they're not growing as fast maybe as they should. But over here, we have one that was damaged by a fire. So if I'm going to take one of these trees, that is a very natural tree to take. And when I take that, the tree that's growing behind it will grow that much faster.
Merv's selective method always leaves a healthy, functioning forest in place. One of the major problems that's been caused by clear-cutting the forests is soil erosion. The worst erosion has been caused by the construction of logging roads. The government has said it will no longer allow logging companies to build roads where they may cause environmental damage. One alternative to roads is harvesting with helicopters. Helicopter logging reduces the need for road building and the use of conventional machines which drag logs over the ground, causing damage to the delicate forest floor. At a cost of around £100 a minute, it's an expensive way of getting logs out of the forest, so it's used sparingly by the logging companies. Logging in the past with little thought for the future has changed the landscape of Vancouver Island, possibly forever. Profits for the timber industry have been more important than protection for the forests.
I don't think the future for the forest is all that good, because they're cutting down just about all the forest now. I think it should kind of slow down.
We can do a good job. I'm very positive about the future of this industry.
We really need to preserve this magic for our children and our children's children and the future heritage of the planet.